What's the most too far you've ever seen a high school prank go? So the senior class 2 years ahead of me forked the lawn in front of the school. A classic, right? Well, they took it a bit further. Instead of buying plastic forks in bulk, the seniors, for their whole school year, methodically pocketed the metal silverware from lunch and breakfast. Not every piece every time, but just enough that the lunch staff would think it was accidental loss. We have a small class size, so kids would bust their own trays by dumping the scraps into big trash cans, and sometimes people would forget to take their silverware off first and they'd get lost. We had regular announcements at lunch reminding us to make sure we didn't throw away the utensils. So in this massive conspiracy that only they knew about, they collected hundreds of metal utensils. The night before their last day of classes, they snuck into the school grounds and methodically stuck hundreds of forks, knives, and spoons into the grass a foot apart each. To make it worse, one of the two custodians had recently been fired, and the remaining custodian was an older guy who was perfectly kind and in an ideal world should have retired sooner. He had to pick them all up by himself. I heard one of the teachers came in early and helped him a little bit, and saw the custodian with tears falling down his cheeks. That hits me and the sad feels hard. They should have made the kids in detention clean it up, or something. Don't make the poor old man do it. As I understand it, he was the first to arrive at the school and see this, and the administration wanted to have it gone before students arrived so no one would be inspired by it. I wish they had more staff out there to help him instead of just him alone cleaning it up. I'm sure it was some administrative decision, like they can't ask other staff to do that kind of labor. But I'm saddened by thinking that no one on their own accord besides the one teacher stopped to help him. Our state is known for being kind and helping strangers, especially in the rural parts. So it's just cruel from my perspective to not stop and help him. A group of kids staged a kidnapping one time. They borrowed a van and drove in front of a busy shopping center. One guy, pretending to escape, jumped out the trunk all wrapped up in duct tape. To the horror of all the bystanders, the van stopped, two kids ran out and recaptured the escapee and drove off. Cops had to go to their homes when the van was identified, and they had a lot of clearing up to do. LOL. My dad, as a sociology project, drove around town with a fake arm hanging out of the trunk, had 3 calls to the police, and they followed them back to the school, got in trouble but also an A. Dude in my school had a crummy old car that the lock was broken and could easily be put in neutral and pushed around. The steering still locked, so mostly kids would push it into a parking space ahead or behind of it. One day they pushed it and it got away from them and it damaged a teacher's car. The kids owned up to it, but considering the owner was so sick of his car being messed with, he called the police. Turns out moving a car a few meters is considered vehicle theft around here, and 3 kids were charged and expelled. This is around a week after the Parkland shooting in Florida. Some freshmen thought it would be a cool idea to bring in a BB pistol during school hours. All the staff thought he was an actual school shooter, and there were a lockdown with everyone ready to throw some heavy books at the first person who came in their rooms. He got expelled, and some say that he got sent to juvie. Edit, I should probably provide more context. The dude was planning to play a prank on a friend of his by pulling out the BB gun. And that's how I spent 3 hours in my chem class panicking. Also how the staff realized. One time at my high school, some dude brought in a string of firecrackers. Big ones. Set them off in the middle of class change. Almost caused a mass panic. Got 2 weeks suspension, despite breaking 3 level 4 offenses which had the automatic punishment of expulsion. Our school administration was a fucking joke. I swear, my school could have an actual school shooter and he'd get a single day in school suspension. The admins are so scared of giving kids actual consequences for their actions. A year before I transferred to a school, I learned that some seniors greased the steps with baby oil, causing students to slip and fall, including teachers, one of which was several months pregnant. The principal ordered that they do not get to walk for graduation. There was this whole mess with the parents fighting to get the punishment overturned. Some of the students got punished and others got to walk for graduation. The parents were like, no one got seriously hurt and it was just a prank. But seriously? It was just a prank that could have potentially hurt or killed someone. Every action has consequences, and you better be ready to own up to that when the hammer comes down. At high school, someone in my year group decided it would be a funny idea to run and tackle a bin that was leaning on a pole. He then pretended to be unconscious, and as the group of students watched on, rumors started to go around that he jumped off the second-story walkway and tackled the pole in the air and then fell towards the ground. He continued to pretend to be unconscious, and as soon as the ambulance arrived to check on his injuries, he suddenly jumped up and ran off into the distance and out of the school. A couple of underclassmen crashed a wholesome senior prank and ruined it. The original prank was spray painting the graduating class year all over the building in washable paint, but these kids came by after they were done and did swears and slurs. The graduating class almost didn't walk until parents kept complaining that their kid, wasn't at fault. They ended up having to do whatever they did to cover up the writings, and there was still a pillar with a dick on it for a few weeks after. I think I went to this school. Did they also paint a Confederate flag on the practice field? Someone bought multiple bottles of this stuff called liquid ass and absolutely poured like 10 bottles of the stuff in the men's restroom. It was truly the smell of putrid rotting dead elephant shit. It was horrendous. If I smelled a dead body, it would be the second worst thing I've ever smelled. It was that bad. Our poor janitor was assigned to clean it up, and so he walked in and immediately projectile vomited all over the bathroom and quit the job on the spot. We were now out a janitor, and the mess now had the new addition of vomit on top of 10 bottles of liquid ass. It took a while to find a new janitor, so the vomit just sort of sat there for a week, and it was basically a biohazard at that point. A new janitor eventually cleaned the mess in a full body suit, but even after bleaching everything we could still smell it for over 6 months. They had to permanently remove the front door to that bathroom. That stuff is putrid. I remember when I was a sophomore, the seniors squirted it on freshmen and they just stank up to high hell all day long. I could only imagine 10 bottles. Dude, I got sprayed once in the locker room while I was peeing, and I nearly died of an asthma attack. I couldn't imagine 10 whole bottles of the stuff. Someone at my middle school did the same thing, but in the lunchroom. It smelled terrible for months, and the guy who did it got suspended. It did not help that he was handing out bottles of the stuff to his friends, and someone poured a bottle of it on a girl's head. He also got suspended. During one of my siblings' tenure, a few students broke into the gymnasium and turned hoses onto the basketball court. Completely ruined everything as it ran a good part of the night. I believe they caught and expelled all of them. My class had a few people superglue as many door locks they could reach. That really made everyone happy. Why the old, carry the teacher's Volkswagen into the quad prank that it at least only caused some inconvenience and not property damage became a thing of the past, I'll never know. This actually happened at a friend's school. A guy found a dead pigeon, and the class decided it would be fun to hide it inside a hardcover folder that a teacher left on her desk. The only problem was that the pigeon would bulge the folder, so they had no better idea than to put it inside and stomp the folder, and pigeon, flat. When the teacher, she was pregnant at the time, opened the folder, she yelled in terror and fainted. They took her out in an ambulance. On the next day, the principal informed the class that the teacher suffered a miscarriage and that they were lucky if she didn't press any charges. Needless to say, they never told anyone whose idea it was or who participated in the prank. Doesn't matter how much time passes, how much you try to sweep this under the rug. Whoever participated in this will be thinking of this for the rest of their lives. I wouldn't call this a prank, but a kid once wrote the name of another kid in his own shit on the toilet wall. This was a fate worse than death for the unsuspecting victim. Cries of derision could be heard throughout the building. Malicious rumors were spread for weeks. The poor kid was subjected to a social death sentence, a dead man walking. It wasn't until a fateful rainy Thursday afternoon, after pay, that the wrongly accused was exonerated when the real shitasso fell victim to his own hubris and was caught brown-handed in the act of fecal graffiti. I broke into my friend's middle school email account in the middle of the night to send his current email address a message from the future. This message was inspired by that one prank from The Office where Jim sends Dwight faxes from the future about the coffee being poisoned. My dumbass took it one step farther and said that my friend needed to stop me and my other friend from playing the piano at break, as otherwise a bomb would go off. My friend took this seriously and alerted a teacher, who immediately knew it was me. Yeah, the police were called, my ass nearly suspended, and I was grounded for a month. Going back about 15 years ago, a group of 10-13 senior kids decided to raid our community school and literally rip off all tube lights, bend all ceiling fans, smash some walls, etc. There was quite a substantial amount of damage. At that time CCTVs weren't all that famous or used, so it was difficult to identify, but luckily there were some eyewitnesses and the boys and their parents were immediately summoned. Kids suspended and parents were asked to foot the bill. Oh. And the kids were named and shamed in front of the whole community. Edit, grammar. This was actually in middle school. The bathrooms had particularly low ceilings. One day some boys went into the girls' bathroom during class time, I guess when the least amount of people would be in there, and somehow managed to get a chair up into the ceiling tiles. Many girls knew they did this and we all thought it was pretty funny. We forgot about the chair for like a week until it came crashing down onto a girl who was using the toilet. This girl was very frail and super underweight. It came down and knocked her out. The school went on lockdown while the paramedics took her to the hospital. She was fine. They locked the bathrooms the rest of the year and only opened them between classes. Many kids would go to the nurse to use the bathroom when they couldn't hold it in class. Why would the school go into lockdown for that? It's not like ceiling chairs are an active threat. For a senior prank at my HS, a group of kids stole a ton, if not all, I can't remember, of the bathroom stall doors. While the administration was trying to figure out who did how to replace all the missing doors, they had makeshift plywood doors installed. They eventually caught the kids who did it and formally charged them with theft and a few other things. It was pretty genius, though. To pay the legal fees, the kids got a shitload of t-shirts printed with the phrase "I prefer the plywood," and most of the school bought them in solidarity. So, all in all, a kind of heartwarming ending to a too-far situation. During every winter, this giant flock of seagulls would always show up at my high school and hang out around campus until springtime. The majority of students ate lunch outside in this huge central courtyard. The seagulls were so annoying and constantly hovering and pretty much begging for food. It was also common to get your food stolen by one if you weren't looking. One day a fellow student had some string in his backpack. So we took 6 feet or so piece of string, tied a bite-sized piece of pizza to one end, and an empty 20 ounces soda bottle to the other. We then proceeded to throw the contraption into a group of seagulls. We never thought they'd fall for it. One seagull swallowed the pizza and started to fly across campus with the string and bottle floating behind him, hanging from his beak. The rest of the seagulls freaked out and were flying behind him as if they were chasing him. The funniest part was that a random female student looked up, saw what she believed to be a floating empty soda bottle, and screamed in horror, "OMG, that bottle is floating." The seagull then vomited up the pizza string contraption and went about his life unharmed. We felt really bad after that and decided not to prank the seagulls anymore. Continued, a few days later some younger kids, freshmen, tried to mimic our little prank. Except it all went wrong for them. A seagull fell for the bait, but ended up getting caught in a tree. The freshmen then started to panic, fearing they'd be in trouble if caught, and had to boost each other up to free the seagull from the tree. The seagull was fine and flew away, but after that, the pranking of seagulls came to an official end. This was alright. I was afraid when it got to the part where the one student opened his backpack. I was afraid it was going to go something like he pulled out Costco-sized box of Alka-Seltzer. There was one year where the seniors at my high school were notoriously bad for end-of-the-year pranks, but the one they're remembered for is when they poured multiple pounds of flour down the most central 4th-floor staircase in the school. It took forever for the custodians to clean up, of course, but also caused lots of kids to have asthma attacks, and the staircase was close in proximity to the special ed classrooms. From what I've heard, many kids did not walk for graduation that year. Legend has it that one summer, our town got super hot and my high school decided to have a school-wide water balloon fight. It was wholesome fun at first, with kids using balloons, water guns, and super soakers to relieve some heat. Then somebody, probably a bunch of them, decided to just use whatever that not water instead. Pretty soon some nasty stuff was in the air. We're talking pee, watered down poop, dirt water, condiment water, etc. That was probably years, maybe a decade ago. They don't do that sort of thing anymore. My brother's senior class decided it'd be a fun prank to break into the school at night. They put dead fish in lockers, shaving cream all down the halls, and broke into the main office and smashed some computers. They then egged the outside for good measure. That hallway smelled like shit for a good month after. None of them faced any legal consequences because one of the kids' dad is a lawyer, but I think they lost their scholarships. Not necessarily a high school prank, but childish nonetheless. I was in the car business and a couple guys went back and forth pranking each other's cars. I don't remember the second to last move, but the final was a little over the top in my opinion. The finisher decided he'd had enough and removed the metal bottom door plate, older car, and lined the underneath with sardines. Once he screwed the plate back on, no one could figure out where the rotten stink was coming from. We didn't all hear until later what he actually did, but the guy he did it to ended up selling his car at a loss because he couldn't get rid of the smell. We used to get small boxes of frozen baked shrimp and lower people's spare tires on trucks during school. Place shrimp inside the rim area and raise it back up. No matter how many times you washed it etc., the smell of death would still be there. Took everyone a couple months to figure it out and then we had to move to other tricks. During the year the class above mine had their year 12 mock-up day, 3 of the guys were standing at the front gate of the school with Nerf guns and balaclavas demanding money to enter the school. They explained they were donating all the money to charity in their year's name but wanted to have fun. Around lunchtime they went down the main street to deposit the money to then donate it, but they forgot to take off the balaclavas as they approached the bank. Locals called the police. All the banks in the main street went on lockdown for suspicious men in balaclavas walking down the street with a Hessian bag. They got to the bank, which had the shutters down for the lockdown, banged on the door wondering what's up since it was the middle of the week, shrugged it off and went back to school, where police eventually caught up with them and the whole thing was straightened out. Thankfully no one hurt or charged, but a massive stuff up on the boys' part. When I was a freshman, the seniors hung up a black list everywhere in the building which depicted all the people, mostly freshmen, they hated for no specific reason. On their last school day, all of them were completely wasted. They started chasing all the people whose names and pics were on the black list, tied them up and brought them to a stage while the rest of the school sat downstairs, being the audience. They embarrassed these people on the stage. They poured water over them and pushed their wet heads into flour or other stuff that got sticky with the water. Some of the victims got over it fast and laughed about it later, while some broke down crying, not ever wanting to go back to school again. Later, we all had to talk to our teachers about this and tell them how we felt about it. I wasn't on that black list, but I knew some of the students who were. I thought it wasn't that cut fun anymore. By the time I was a senior, we weren't allowed to do anything of the sort anymore, so we just threw some water balloons at the other kids. It was a hot summer's day, so everybody actually liked it. Not all seen by me, but I heard from teachers a few, letting 4 pugs loose in the school, numbered 1, 2, 3 and 5. Taking a car apart and reassembling it around the flagpole. Putting the German teacher's desk out on the tennis courts, which are visible from the German room. A year or so ago the German and Spanish students a year older than me switched classrooms. The German students went to the Spanish room and vice versa. The teachers got a kick out of that one, and I think they let the kids goof around that period. Edit, pigs, not pugs. Pugs are pigs? Because having 4 pugs loose in the school seems like it would be a great time.